You're listening to the Roundup Podcast, a podcast on reaching the college campus, developing leaders, and sending out kingdom multipliers. This podcast is created by the Southern Baptists of Texas Convention and provided through cooperative program giving.
Well, howdy, friends, and welcome to the Roundup Podcast. I'm your host, Mitch Tidwell, and I have my co-host with me today, Chase Abner. Chase, what's up, man?
Hey, Mitch. Good to be here, man. I am very excited to hear from today's guest. He's a hero, leaving the warm, sunny fields of Texas to move to the frozen north of Iowa en route to Michigan. Mr. Zach Cunningham.
Mr. Zach Cunningham. Hey, Zach, where out in Texas were you originally from?
Well, thanks for having me. I am originally from Honey Grove, Texas, small town in Northeast Texas, but I went to school in Denton, Texas. I would tell people I'm from Dallas up here.
Gotcha. Well, so Northeast Texas. So you did have, I don't know why, for some reason I was thinking West Texas. So I was thinking like flat. So I was like, well,
still pretty flat in East Texas.
Oh no, I forgot. Yeah, it is still pretty flat up there. But anyways, man, we're glad to have you on, dude. We wanted to bring you on. We know that you were serving in a pretty good sized ministry here in Denton at Overflow for several years, and then you went up and followed Austin Wadlow to East Lansing. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Well, to Ames, Iowa first, and then to East Lansing. So
go Clones.
Yeah, you are the Salt Company director there. So, man, tell us a little bit about yourself, Zach, how you got to where you're at, and a little bit about your church, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's a bit of a whirlwind. Yeah, I'm Zach. I am the Salt Company director at East Lansing at the Commons Church, which is the name of our new church plant. From Texas. We got married 3 years ago. Just celebrated my 3-year anniversary a couple of weeks ago. And so,
amen.
Yeah, man, 26 years old. My wife, Mally, and I have been married for 3 years, and man, we're loving East Lansing. So,
did y'all meet in Denton?
Yes. And so I went to school at UNT, North Texas, go Mean Green Eagles. Call.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we actually met as student leaders in that ministry that you're talking about, Overflow. And so, yeah, we met and started dating, got engaged, and then pretty much just moved right after getting married. And so we got married, and then 10 days later moved to Ames, Iowa, of all places. So
wow. Hey, man. Well, that's that's a jump. I tell you what, I don't see many guys in Texas, and this is, I know for everyone that's listening that's not from Texas, you're going to roll your eyes. Just go ahead and roll them. But you just don't see many guys leaving Texas to go somewhere else. So I can't wait to hear about this story, man.
Yeah, no shot. Nobody leaves Texas unless they're called by the Lord to leave.
That's right, man. That's right.
Yeah. Zach, I'd love to hear more about just your time in college. What was that like as a believer and becoming a leader in ministry?
Yeah, it's a pretty crazy story. I'm like your textbook leadership pipeline product, even though that wasn't the language that was being used back then. So I go to college, not really chasing after Jesus, but the American dream, man. I was an accounting major, chasing those six figures, trying to get that white picket fence, suburb house, sports car, minivan. And yeah, I was doing that. And then one day, my freshman year, I bump into a guy on campus at UNT who invited me to the college ministry at First Baptist there in Denton. I ran cross country against him in high school. Anyways, he's like, yo, tonight, come to the worship night. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm a Christian. I do that. And so I go, man, and Austin Wadlow's there. And he's preaching, I think that night, he's preaching on predestination. Now, I didn't care really anything about what he was saying, but I was like pretty compelled because, there's some 300 students here, college students worshiping Jesus, like as if it was actually true. And that was pretty compelling for me. And so I like jump into a small group like that night and start serving. I joined the parking team. I go to the Madden tournament like that next weekend and kind of just plug in, man. Early college ministry guy, jumping in, and man, God did a lot through that. That next year, I jump on the leadership team and lead a small group. And it was there that God was really getting a hold of my heart. I was chasing the accounting thing, and thank God. I love accounting. My twin brother's doing accounting currently, but thankful that God called me out of ministry. And a lot of that, Mitch, came through, which is just kind of a surreal podcast for me, because Mitch, we met when I was in Texas. You're that world. And Chase Abner, I met him in Iowa. So he's that world. It's exciting, man. But when I was in Texas, man, I jumped all the way in. I went on a mission trip to East Asia, and then I went to Beach Reach for 4 years in a row. Everything that would move you across the pipeline to be a leader, I was there. I worked at Pine Cove. I went to the Send conference. I did everything you can, man. And just felt like God was calling me to give my life to this. It gave me, the Bible gave me a better dream than the American dream. Like the reality, the story that Austin and ultimately what God was casting at Overflow, man, just gave me a bigger vision for my life. And so, man, I jump in. Austin hires me to be an intern, which was a crazy decision as a young guy. And then, yeah, I mean, the story kind of just picks up from there. Austin leaves. The SALT network steals my boss. And I'm like, why is he moving to Iowa of all places? And he jumped ship. And then I helped lead that ministry for a year and a half. And then long story short, man, he calls me up, actually meet Mark Vance at Beach Reach. And he says, hey, you should consider jumping on board. And then Austin calls me and says, hey, you want to, jump in and move to Michigan to plant a church. And I was engaged at the time, and talked to my wife, my future wife, and her parents, and, got married. And then the journey began. So I know it's a lot, but that's kind of a wild on-ramp to where I'm at now. So crazy.
I love hearing more of that story. We lived here in the same city, but I think there are pieces of that I hadn't heard before. So thanks for sharing that.
Well, there is a piece missing between Wadlow leaving and Zach going, where I tried to insert myself to keep
in
Zach
Texas
here in Texas, but it didn't work. So, but hey, it's worked out. So,
Mitch, that was actually those are some great conversations with you, man. You were super encouraging. Yeah. So.
Zach, you said something like the Bible gave you a better dream than the American dream. And I'm just thinking about man, you had a lot of good reasons maybe to say no to leaving Texas and doing what you're doing now. You were freshly married, had a college degree. You probably could have, made good bank doing accounting or something like that. You could have stayed and led Overflow, whatever. So what is that dream? Like, what is it that compelled you to leave that comfort and that stability and that script that you had to do what you're doing now?
Yeah. Oh, man, living for the kingdom of God. Jesus is calling our life to make disciples, and not just the general call that all believers have, but specifically for me, college ministry and what God was doing on the college campus. I'll never forget. So Austin comes back from Iowa. He does like a hitchhikers event. And he's like, Zach, you won't believe what God is doing at the SALT network. And he starts telling me that they're convincing, freshmen and sophomores to transfer and give 2 years of their lives, seniors give 2 years of their lives to go and help plant churches, all these things. I'm like, no chance. There's no way people are doing it. He's like, no, they are. And the fact that people would give up their lives to go and to help start churches and go overseas, man, they were sending hundreds of people overseas. That's a better thing to live for than that American dream, and it was scratching a deeper desire than the desire for money and girls at the time. It was my soul, man, and something bigger. And so, dude, it was a wild time, but I'll never forget what God did in college. So it's crazy.
Zach, tell us a little bit about, you go, obviously there's that big vision there, that Austin kind of cast to you enough to move you and your newly married wife up to Ames and then to Michigan. Tell us a little bit kind of about the SALT network and kind of what you do. Like what is that for some of our audience that doesn't know?
Yeah. Well, I still feel like an outsider sometimes with the SALT network because I still remember, hearing it for the first time. And so every time I hear the story, the vision, it still feels like the first time. But long story short, this is like the website definition of the SALT network. It's a family of multi-generational churches with a passion for the next generation. Long story short, man, it's churches who love college students, who put them at the front of the bus, and man, go hard and believe that if you can win the campus, you can win the world. It started, I think, 2010 out of Ames, Iowa, the cornfields that Chase Abner so loves. And, God put it on the heart of a guy like Troy Nesbitt and Jack Owens to start some college ministries across the network or across the country. And so right now, there's probably 18, 20 or so SALT companies, college ministries on campuses, all housed in a local church. So church-based college ministry at major university centers. And so with a vision, planting churches every year on other university campuses.
And for those who are new to the concept of SALT company, there's some distinctives, right, that set it apart from other types of college ministry. So what would you say makes a college ministry a SALT company in the SALT network?
Yeah, there's certain things that we do across the network that if you go to any salt company, it's going to be pretty similar. Like the language is going to be the same. Some of the events, like for example, each one of our ministries does a midweek gathering. A lot of college ministries do that, but that's something that we do. We also have student-led discipleship, primarily through small groups. And so we raise up students to lead those groups. We've got some other things that we do as well, like some sort of training, Gospel 101, like equipping courses that each salt company is going to do. We have some events that we do by ourselves, and then together, the fall retreat, some sort of like fall event to get people to come to. And then my favorite thing about being in the network is every spring, minus last year, all of the salt companies come together for a huge conference called the Salt Company Conference, worship night, great teaching, and really casting vision to throw fuel on the fire of church planting. And so, man, it's a great thing.
Zach, what have been some of the biggest differences that you've found now? Because you've been East Lansing, you've been gone for 3 years. Mm-hmm. How long have you been in East Lansing now?
2.
2 years. Okay. What have been some of the major differences of, hey, leaving the type of ministry you're in at Overflow to go up to be a part of a church planting network, and then not just that, but you're now actually in a whole different context from Bible Belt, Texas to East Lansing, Michigan. What were the differences there?
Yeah. Well, this is new. In Texas, Austin had built such a great, healthy ministry, and I got to help transition it and help take over that. Coming here was different, man. Starting something from scratch. That's the biggest difference, man. So it was fun. It was challenging. As far as the differences between Texas and East Lansing, there's probably a lot, but for me as the college pastor, dude, every college campus has so many similarities. Like the context is almost the same. That might be a great question to ask, like a lead pastor who's reaching the community. But dude, I'm telling you, these are the same 18 to 22-year-olds who are wearing lanyards, who are wanting to have a good time, who have no clue what they're doing, who want a vision for their life. They want the greatest cause that they can live for. Man, that's going to be the same. It feels the same. Now, there's differences, man. Like, so when I moved to Iowa and to Michigan, no one had heard of guys like John Piper, Matt Chandler. Like, I'm tossing these names out, like books that I've read. These people don't give a rip about, they don't know who Jonathan Pokluda is. These guys, man, a lot of them haven't even heard the gospel. There's a lot of Catholics up here. There's a lot of other, backgrounds. And so I grew up in the Bible Belt, and so for them not to know some of those guys, it was shocking at first. I had to adjust. But when you get down to the grit of what I do, and it's the same, trying to reach these young people.
So I don't know if we've even mentioned you're ministering at Michigan State University.
That's right, baby. Go Green, greatest university in Michigan. Easy.
Dude. So for some reason, I don't know why, but when I was in middle school, I got on this Michigan kick where I still have these two like small helmets, like a Michigan Wolverines and then the Michigan State Spartans helmets. I still have them now. My son plays with them. But I became ultimately a Michigan State fan because of a guy named TJ Duckett. He's got to be a legend around there. And I think it was I probably need to land the plane on this because people are probably tuning out of the podcast right now. But this is like my Michigan State memory. But it was this epic win against Michigan State, TJ Duckett. He went on to play with the Falcons. But anyways, I'm a big Michigan State fan. So how big, tell us a little bit about that campus. What is that? What's the size of that? It's public school. It's a public or a state school.
Yeah. There's Michigan State, beautiful campus here in the central Michigan area. 50,000 students. Wow. Lots of international students. Pre-COVID, it's like 8,000 international students, primarily Chinese. And so huge sports school. Tons of school spirit, which was totally different for me from UNT. Okay. Not that North Texas doesn't love North Texas, but let's be real. This is a different university experience, but man, it's great. One thing a lot of people don't know about East Lansing is there's actually a community college right down the road in Lansing, LCC, that has almost 20,000 students. And so across the board, man, in the greater Lansing metro, give or take 65, 70,000 college students. And so
20,000.
Yeah, it's crazy, man.
What would you say distinguishes the Michigan State community from like University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. Like, I'm thinking about here in Iowa, you got the University of Iowa vibe, and then you got the Iowa State vibe. So help us get a sense of just culturally what the feel is on campus.
Yeah. I might get in trouble for saying this, but
that's what I want. That's actually why I'm asking the question.
I get paid to be a Michigan State fan, dude. Love Michigan State. Don't get me wrong. A lot of our students applied to Michigan and didn't get in. Like, that's just across the board. Michigan is like, it's not Ivy League, but like it's Ivy League. You've got to have like a 4.0 to get in. Yeah. Super academic. The town Ann Arbor, man, I was actually excited when Austin called me and said, Zach, we're going to go plant in Michigan. I thought he meant like Wolverines, bro. And I was an X-Men fan growing up. Wolverine was my guy. I was super excited. And so I'm researching Ann Arbor. It's like top college town in America next to Denton, Texas. But then he calls me back. He calls me back and he says, no. We're not planting Michigan. We're planting Michigan State. And here's why. And he had an incredible reason, because Michigan State's in the middle of Michigan, and 80% of the students who go to Michigan State are from Michigan. And that means most of them are actually going to stay in Michigan. They're going to get jobs in Mount Pleasant, Grand Rapids. Most of the students who go to Michigan are not, at least not 80%, aren't Michigan people. And so they're going to go and move and do all those things. And so it was strategic for us as the first church plant in Michigan to try to get in the middle and to try to get as many Michiganders as possible to help fuel future church planting.
Michiganders, that's what it's officially called?
Isn't that so weird? Yeah. I had no Michiganites. No, Michiganders. Okay. Crazy, man.
Interesting.
Well, speaking of the Michiganders, man, how are you going to reach them? Like, what's this fall going to look like for you guys? A lot of things have changed in the world on campuses, but just kind of give us the principles that guide your Salt Company ministry for the fall.
Yeah. Well, fingers are crossed that it's more of a open fall with COVID. Last year was different, but man, we are going to do our best. So it's August 10th. We're recording this in 2 weeks. Our leaders come back to town. And so we'll have like a leader retreat. We've got 35 leaders that for 2 days, man, we're going to try to pump as much vision for their campus, as much like strategy and culture into them as possible to leverage them on campus, to help see themselves as missionaries to that campus. And then, man, for those next 3 weeks, we're going to go as hard as we can to reach not just freshmen this year, but actually sophomores as well, man. Michigan State did not allow sophomores to come to campus, most of them. And so we have 2 freshman classes, if you will, coming. And so, dude, that's upwards of 15,000 people who've never stepped foot on campus. And so This year, against all years, is probably one of the biggest years to actually go all out. So we'll bring our leaders in and we'll try to cast a wide net as far as doing different events, different parties that first, week, just trying to get students to know who we are and build relationships and teach our students to make friends fast and then try to get them to come out and hear the gospel. So,
yeah. Well, I heard a few principles at work there. One, I heard you invest a lot of the mission into the students. It's not Zach or paid professionals. We deposit the vision and the strategy in the students and then let them go hardest of all. And secondly, I heard you say a principle or kind of guiding what you said was people who are new to campus are your prime audience for those activities in the first few weeks.
Yeah. I know like there's some stat about, freshmen who grew up in church. If they don't get plugged in the first 3 weeks, like 70% fall out. So we'll go hard, man. Those first 3 weeks are very important in a college career. I just got a puppy, my wife and I. His name is Moose. He's a Jack Russell. And, I'm researching all about how to raise a puppy because I know that in those first few weeks of having a puppy, it really sets like the rhythm of who they are. And so you give them a lot of treats, man, they're going to be treat motivated. If you let them sleep in your bed, they're going to sleep in your bed because those first 3 weeks of having a puppy is going to set the course. Man, it's the same thing with freshmen. Those first 3 weeks, what you do in those first 3 weeks, what you invest, what habits you start, that's going to carry you, not just as a senior, man, but the rest of your life. So we go, very hard during those first 3 weeks to reach them, man, because we try to pull them in.
Zach, you mentioned parties and things like that. Can we let's get down to the weeds just a little bit of like, what does that look like? Are you just telling like a couple of your leaders, hey, open up your home, throw a party? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah. So if our leader retreat is a Thursday night, like it ends on Thursday night, we've got a week because our midweek's on Thursday of when students move in to when our first gathering is. And so we have, as a staff, intentionally planned certain things that our students have like told us would be a good idea. And then also we leave some things open for our students to kind of get creative. And so at that retreat, we're going to try to help them see the next 7 days as a mission trip. Okay, we'll call it mission trip to campus or Reach Week. You know, we're going on a trip to that campus, except you don't have to leave the country. You just got to leave your dorm room. And so, yeah, man, so we'll do that first weekend, different things. Like the students will do volleyball on campus. Michigan State's a big campus, so we'll split them up into teams. You know, we'll go to each side of campus and play volleyball. We'll play spike ball. We try to throw a couple large group events for the sake of just getting people there and gathering traction. And so we'll have a pancake party at a house near campus where we just try to make as many pancakes as possible and have a good time. We'll do like a scavenger hunt on campus that we call a Sasquatch hunt. There's a lot behind that, but we pretty much just dress a guy up as a Sasquatch and try to find him on campus. And we'll feed him food after that. And the rest of that week, other than those big events, it's really just our students on campus, man. They'll go to the dorms. They're trying to reach people, get contacts, and just make friends fast. You know, think about how you made a friend in college and try to do that first week with new people. And, you know, we really encourage them, reach the people you once were, you know, whether it's, you know, you're a party animal or you're the sports guy, like go find where freshman Matt or freshman Amanda hung out and, man, go hang out and try to share the gospel with them. So
that's good. That's good. So as you move, you know, beyond kickoff season for the semester, kind of what is the rhythm, you know, when does that change and what does the rhythm look like for you guys? Or what do you anticipate maybe coming in to this fall semester?
Yeah, man, once we get kicked off, you know, our hope is to start those small groups. And so at our kickoff, really the goal is to cast a wide net to get them into these small groups that are going to meet every week. Student-led groups on campus and off campus, led by our leaders, you know, every week. And they'll talk about the sermon that we teach on Thursday night. And so we're trying to get people to come back. We're going to teach the Sermon on the Mount this fall. I'm excited for it. And then one of the vision pieces we have is how do we get these freshmen and freshmores or sophomores, whatever you want to call them, to our fall retreat. It's like an early October thing, man. It's where we go to a retreat. We teach the Bible. We have fun. And I heard Mark Vance say this when I was in Iowa. He said this, that if you can get a bunch of 18-year-olds to travel 2 hours to a retreat and stay overnight to listen to the Bible, you've got them. Like they're going to stick, you know? And so that's our hope. How can we get freshmen to the fall retreat? We'll discount it. You know, we'll make some video that makes them excited to come. But our hope really is to get them to come and be a part of the community that they'll find and hopefully be changed by Jesus. And so,
Zach, if you could kind of, you know, wave a magic wand and have the perfect 2021-22 year this year, man, what does that look like for you at the salt company there at the Commons?
Yeah. You know, we haven't had a year yet here at Michigan State that hasn't been affected by COVID. Year one, March, it came, and then last year it was different. And I'm not naive. I don't know what's going to happen this next year with the virus. But if we could just have a year where our new student leaders who led for us last year could lead somewhat of a normal small group and grow in that way and invest in people and make disciples. And by the end of the year, not to have like a full auditorium and lose the campus, but actually to like double our leadership team. Like that's a goal that our staff is tossing around. Like, what's it going to take for us to take 34 and make 68 disciple makers by the end of the year? Like that's pretty basic, but that's honestly, if I had that, Mitch, like if at the end of 2021, we were able to pull that off, I mean, that would be more than I would ever dream or hope for.
That's good, man.
It's good. Well, and yeah, talk more about that, Zach. Like, what are the levers that you're pulling, if you will? You know, you talked about kickoff, just getting the contacts, getting people exposed to the gospel, to Salt Company, to the church. You talked about the fall retreat that kind of helps cement that relationship and their identity with Salt and as a believer. Like, what else do you do to help move them beyond that stage to saying, yeah, I'm willing to be a leader and commit the time and effort and energy that it takes to serve the church in that way?
Yeah. Certainly the fall retreat is like the first kind of like area that we try to push students to come, because so many of our leaders actually have been to that fall retreat, man. There's just something about going and finding community there. And then throughout that, man, we're trying to get them into some sort of equipping class where they're learning some basic doctrine, how to study the Bible, how to pray, how to memorize scripture. We're trying to get them to come to the conference and have a big vision casted for their life. We're trying to get them into small discipleship groups where they're meeting regularly to confess sin and read the Bible. And then we're trying to shepherd them well. We do have an interview process like a lot of college ministries have, like apply to be a leader. And through that, man, that's even another time for us to get to know them as staff and to interview them, sometimes to share the gospel and have people put their faith in Jesus at those things. And so, yeah, those are some of the benchmarks that I'm thinking through. We have overseas trips that, each year we're trying to send teams overseas that, man, when people go overseas and live their life in a different country, they come back on fire for the campus. And so, man, that's another place I'm trying to get people to go. The past 2 years, I've had a team ready to go overseas, and, obviously they couldn't go, but we'll see about next year.
Yeah. Man, Zach, I want to transition for just a second here and think through being a guy in Texas, newly married, going up to plant, and it doesn't really turn out anything like you had thought because of COVID stuff. Yeah. I'm thinking of the person now that is maybe has a burden to be called to be sent, whether that's a plant, be a part of a plant or something like that. Like, what are some ways to prepare? Two things here. What are some ways like to maybe prepare yourself to do that? Or maybe is there some boxes to check before you go jumping off and do that? And then two, like, how has that affected your marriage? How has that affected your relationship with your wife, and how have you navigated that? So there's a lot of question, a lot of information and everything I just shared with you. Why don't you try to answer that?
Yeah. So if I could think back, 3 years, I'm sitting in Texas and I'm getting this like call to go, like what prepared me and what played itself in. First of all, if they're a college student, I'd say, man, find a church that loves sending. They don't have to have a college ministry per se. Obviously, we value the next generation, but man, find a church that values sending. Like you can see that they've sent people overseas or they're church planting, and get around those types of people. And then, express to your leaders like, hey, this is something that God might be calling me to do. And dude, I think another thing is just listen to stories of people who've gone, or read biographies of people who've gone overseas. That's one thing to encourage your faith, man. Hear stories of the way that some of these SALT guys are getting sent out, or some of these missionaries that go overseas. Find some old Christian biographies, start reading them, man. Read some really good books. That's one thing God used in my life. I read Don't Waste Your Life by John Piper. I read Radical. I read Master Plan of Evangelism, and I was getting in my heart a burden for the lost, and then just realize that God has called you to be a disciple maker somewhere. Now it may be back at home, wherever you're at, but I have seen that God has used sending and leaving kind of home as a way to stretch my faith. Like, it's a blessing to go somewhere else and depend on the Lord to do those things. Everyone's called to go. There's this quote from Hudson Taylor, and this is more of a missionary quote, but God used it to wreck my life. He said, so many people are wondering, man, do I have a special call to go, like to leave where I'm at and go? And he said this, he said, dude, with the facts laid before you, and the call from Jesus to go and make disciples of all nations, you better find out if you've got a special call to stay. And dude, that idea, which I think is so biblical, oh dude, if that can get your heart, yeah, your feet will move as well. And so, man, those are some of the things that I would say pushed me to go and to do this. As far as how it affected my marriage, my wife is a trooper, man. So first of all, I left this part out of the story. She was actually in nursing school when we got the call to leave and to uproot our lives to go to Iowa and then to Michigan. And so I told her, I was like, hey, so we have this call, but we're not going. You're in nursing school. This isn't God's call on our life. And she looks at me dead in the eye and says, what are you talking about? We're going. And so she drops out. Dude, she drops out of nursing school. And so we moved to Iowa. And she didn't have a job. My job was secure, but she gets a job at a coffee shop in Ames, Iowa, Bergie's coffee shop. And she's selfless, man. She's serving where she's at. And I'll tell you this, man, Iowa was difficult. That little 10-month stint in Iowa, making friends that you knew you were going to have to leave. That's a hard paradigm to go through. But when we got to East Lansing, man, that was such a sweet time for us to kind of put a little bit of roots down, and I say that cautiously. Yeah. But dude, it has made my wife and I more dependent on the Lord. We left 10 days after our wedding, and we weren't right down the door from mom and dad, man. We were 11 hours up the road in Iowa. We couldn't run home to mom and dad, and we got to fight. No, it forces us to, do a little conflict resolution and grow. And man, we have just seen God do so many things in our life. We feel like we have a front row seat to what God's doing, and we're just eating popcorn, man. And so I would just say it's a blessing. It's hard as all get out, but dude, I would not, if I could go back, I wouldn't change a thing.
Yeah.
I appreciate the shout out to Bergie's Coffee. That's my jam, Zach.
Every time I go there, I see you there in Iowa. So.
Hey, that's not the one in the gas station, is it?
Oh yeah,
is it? Okay.
Well, there's one in the gas station. There's one in the hospital. Now there's one on the north side of town. Zach, nice. Come back. I'll treat you, man. Bro. I'll treat you.
Hey, that's a good coffee shop. I had when I stayed at Hitchhiker's, Troy's son. I stayed with him and his wife, and anyways, he took me there each morning. He would take me there to get coffee. It's good coffee.
I just had a cup from their roastery, Windmill Coffee.
Unreal.
So hopefully they can sponsor the podcast. But also, before I ask another question, I just wanted to shout out this story about Mally. Yeah, I remember being at a baptism service and a guy getting baptized who confessed he was a former atheist, came to Christ, and it was because Mal shared Christ with him while working at the coffee shop. Wow. So
crazy.
Just celebrate your wife, man, and want to honor her and her contribution to the mission here in Ames. She's here for 10 months, but it didn't matter. Like she was on mission for those 10 months and certainly worth celebrating.
Right. Outkicked my coverage.
Cool, yeah. Man. All right. So let me talk about Mitch Tidwell now. So one of the reasons I say yes to co-hosting a podcast with Mitch, sponsored by the Southern Baptist of Texas, is because, Mitch loves Texas, right? I was with him. When was I with you? In May? And he took me to this store. He talked it up, and he's like, oh, this is very special. And we roll in, and it's just a bunch of stuff celebrating Texas. I'm like, okay. But honestly, it was cool. He got me a shirt, a dope Fort Worth shirt that I can't wait to bust out when it's long sleeve weather.
That is the most Texas thing. Hey, I'm going to buy you a gift, and I'm going to buy you a gift of a state that's not your state.
Oh, my gosh.
But here's the point. Like, as much as Mitch loves Texas, he wants people to go where God sends them. And so knowing that a lot of people in this audience are folks who are, volunteer or staff leaders in college ministries around the great state of Texas, Zach, why would you encourage them to consider leaving Texas to do something like what you've done?
Someone's got to go to Nineveh, bro. That's why. By the way, my wife and I love Texas, dude. We grew up there. We got friends and family there. The weather's great. Okay, no state income tax.
Yeah.
But I'd say this, man, the church per capita, in Dallas, at least where I'm from, there's a mega church on every corner, man. They're preaching the Bible. Like there's a lot of churches that you would pray, man, I hope my son goes to that church. This is not a rag on the churches in East Lansing. There's not a whole lot of churches who are Bible believing, Bible teaching, Jesus-centered churches, man. And that's at least the context here. I know Iowa's got a number of churches and different, but up north, man, it's just different. And so if you feel called to help make an impact and make another option for a future kid to go to a church that teaches Jesus and loves the Bible, like that's one thing, man. That was compelling for me. I thought Texas was reached by a lot. Now, certainly there's people need to stay and continue to spread the gospel, but yeah, man, that's the thing that got me, man. Not a lot. I mean, there's a lot of churches, man, but not a lot of them teaching the Bible.
Man,
that's good.
That's good, man.
Thank you.
Well, Zach, we appreciate you being on, man. This has been so good to catch up with you. Can't wait to see, honestly, man. Just, hopefully eventually at some point COVID will get out of here. There can be a little bit more normalcy and to see both you and Austin, know both of you guys are very gifted and anointed men of the Lord doing awesome things. And so just can't wait to see what the Lord does in East Lansing through you guys. And And who knows, maybe you guys need to plant a church and it may end up back down south. You really never know.
I'll tell Austin.
You never know. So
we'll see.
See, that's what happened, man. Once salt companies started taking Texas's best, man, we just had to shut down the borders.
No.
So, all right, we'll end on that note.
Too soon.
Zach, thanks for being on today, man. We really enjoyed you, and we look forward to keeping up with you, man.
Hey, it's my pleasure, man. Thanks for having me.
All right, we'll see you, man. Friends, thanks for joining us today on the Roundup Podcast. Something I want to let you know about before you go is October 12th through the 14th, we are going to be hosting Sin Summit, and that is in partnership with the Redeemer Church in Lubbock, Texas. This is a collegiate church planting event, so if you're a church that is desiring to become a collegiate church planting church, if you're someone who wants to plant a collegiate church planting church, or if you want to be a part of one of those teams, this is an excellent event for you to be a part of. We'd love to have you there. We'll have the Redeemer crew. We have Resonate Church with Keith Weezer, and those folks will be down as we discuss what does it take to do that? What are the practical things you need to know? And then also want to put you into a community that you can begin to discuss that with to figure out, hey, is this where the Lord is leading me? So don't forget that. It's Sin Summit, October 12th through the 14th. You can find out more information at sinsummit.org. All right. So don't forget that. Would love to see you there. It is a completely free event. So yeah, definitely love to see you there. And also, hey, don't forget to like, to subscribe to our podcast on Apple or Spotify. Review us. We'd love to hear back from you, and keep up to date with us at SBTC Collegiate. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. So follow us there. And then our Facebook group, the Roundup Network, you can join in a conversation with hundreds of leaders there. So we'd love to see you there too. But thanks for joining us today, and we will see you next time.